to avoid having that as an obstacle to getting a bill approved. The debt limit, by the way, will be reached by next Thursday if no action is taken. And now live to the floor of the U.S. House here on C-SPAN.
The House will be in order. Prayer will be offered by our chaplain, Father Conroy.
Let us pray. We give you thanks, O God, for giving us another day. As you make available to your people the grace and knowledge to meet the needs of the day, we pray that your Spirit will be upon the members of this people's house, giving them the richness of your wisdom. Bless the members of the minority party as they prepare to gather the end of this week. May they, with those who accompany them, travel safely and meet in peace. Bless also the majority party as they will be returning to their constituencies. Give them hearts and ears to listen well to all those whom they represent. May the power of your truth and our faith in your providence give them all the confidence they must have to do the good work required for service to our nation. May all that is done this day be for your greater honor and glory. Amen.
Amen.
The Chair has examined a journal of the last day's proceedings and announces to the House his approval thereof. Pursuant to Clause 1 of Rule 1, the journal stands approved. For what purpose does the gentleman from Rhode Island rise?
Mr. Speaker, pursuant to Clause 1 of Rule 1, I demand a vote on the Speaker's approval of the journal.
The question is on agreeing to the Speaker's approval of the journal. Those in favor indicate by saying aye. Those opposed, no. Opinion of the Chair, the ayes have it. The journal stands approved. The gentleman from Rhode Island.
Mr. Speaker, I object to the vote on the grounds that a quorum is not present and make a point of order that a quorum is not present.
Pursuant to Clause 8 of Rule 20, further proceedings on this question are postponed. The Pledge of Allegiance today will be led by the gentleman from California, Mr. Huffman.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
The Chair will entertain up to 15 requests for 1-minute speeches on each side of the aisle. For what purpose does the gentlelady from Florida rise? Without objection.
Mr. Speaker, I rise today to honor Matt Cowdery on being named Australia's 2013 Multi-Class Swimmer of the Year. Matt is serving as a fellow in my office as part of the Unicapital Washington Internship Program, which is ably led by Director Eric Fettering. Matt is no stranger to success. He is the most decorated Paralympic athlete of all time in Australia, having won 13 gold medals and 23 overall in Athens, Beijing, and London. Even though Matt was born down under, he exemplifies the American spirit and is a testimony to the power of hard work and determination. Matt, it's been wonderful having you be part of our congressional team, and I look forward to hearing all about your future successes, including from the pool in Rio in 2016 and likely someday in the Australian Parliament. So congratulations, Matt, once again on all of your amazing accomplishments. It's been great having you in our team. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Madam Speaker.
For what purpose does the gentleman from New York rise? Without objection. Gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Mr. Speaker, 5 years ago, tomorrow, Continental Flight 3407 crashed in western New York. This was a tragedy that took so many good people far too soon and changed the community forever. The cause of the crash was found to be pilot and crew error, with fatigue being a contributing factor. An inspiring act of love, the families of those lost formed as impressive an advocacy effort as I've ever seen. Drawing strength and purpose from their loss, they successfully convinced Congress and the FAA to enact landmark aviation safety reforms. Their call for one level of safety has become a rallying cry for all of those who want to make sure that this kind of preventable tragedy is not visited upon other families and other communities. Mr. Speaker, today I and all of western New York stand in unity with the families of Flight 3407. We feel their loss and express our sympathy to them. but we also stand in awe of their commitment and tireless effort to work on behalf of travelers everywhere. The entire American traveling public owes a debt of gratitude to these families who turn tragedy into purpose. I yield back the balance of my time.
For what purpose does the gentlewoman from North Carolina rise?
Madam Speaker, I ask unanimous consent to address the House for 1 minute.
Without objection, the gentlewoman is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Recent CBO estimates predict that regulatory changes created by Obamacare will remove 2.3 million Americans from the full-time workforce. The President has gone to great lengths to spin this as a positive development, saying job losses will come as a result of people voluntarily choosing to pursue interests other than full-time work. It's true that, all else being equal, individuals and families being able to make ends meet while working less is a cause for celebration. The problem is that all else is not equal. We have a social safety net that depends on robust economic growth and is already forecast to run perpetual deficits for decades to come. No one disputes that 2.3 million lost jobs will diminish economic growth. For as long as I've been in Congress, Republicans have been working to enact structural reforms to put our budget back in balance. Last week's CBO report makes those reforms even more urgent. I yield back.
For what purpose does the gentlewoman from California rise? Without objection, gentlewoman is recognized for a minute.
Thank you. Madam Speaker, in the aftermath of the Great Recession, Congress established the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau for a very clear reason: to ensure that financial markets and services work for all Americans, not just the big banks and best connected. Today, the CFPB makes sure that consumers get the information they need to make smart financial decisions on everything from mortgages to credit cards to student loans. Today, the House majority will introduce a purely partisan measure called the Consumer Financial Protection, Safety, and Soundness Improvement Act. Well, that's a mouthful, if nothing else. But rather than improve the CFPB, it would do precisely the opposite by undermining its independence and limiting its rulemaking authority. Consumer protections could be scrapped. We must not repeat the same costly mistakes that put our economy in the freefall of the Great Recession.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Alabama rise?
Madam Speaker, I request unanimous consent to address the House for 1 minute.
Gentleman, without objection, gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Madam Speaker, I rise today in recognition of National Marriage Week. Every year, in the lead up to Valentine's Day, we recognize the importance of the institution of marriage and the stability it brings to the American household. Married couples lead longer lives, have greater financial and emotional stability, and are healthier and generally happier than their unmarried counterparts. However, only 52% of adults in America are married today, a steep decline from 80% in 1970. Children who grow up in a two-parent household generally perform better in school, stay out of trouble, and are on track to live a healthier and happier life. Yet today, over 40% of babies are born out of marriage, compared to only 5% in 1960. I've been married to my wife, Rebecca, for 33 years. We have enjoyed raising our 4 wonderful children, the oldest of whom is now married himself. I believe promoting the positive benefits of marriage is important for the happiness, stability, and well-being of the next generation. I'm proud to recognize National Marriage Week, and I yield back.
For what purpose does the gentlewoman from Texas rise?
Speaker, I ask unanimous consent to address the House for 1 minute.
Without objection, gentlewoman is recognized for 1 minute.
Madam Speaker, just a few minutes ago, I left the House Judiciary Committee discussing asylum fraud abusing America's compassion, a hearing that was called by the Republican majority. Madam Speaker, I adhere to following the law. But I do believe as we approach the 50th year of the 1964 Civil Rights Act, we will see more and more voices being raised for the indignity and lack of human rights on not passing comprehensive immigration reform. Let me remind my colleagues that the Refugee Act, the Asylum Act, was signed by President Reagan in 1980, and it was to reflect America's values, reflecting this country's deep-seated commitment to liberty and human dignity, as well as to pledge under the Refugee Convention's protocol to save those who have been abused or sexually abused or children who have been subject to violence or families that have been subject to violence. Let's get on with the values of this nation. Let's pass comprehensive immigration reform. Let's restore the values of this country, provide laws to secure all of our borders, but yet continuing to have these hearings suggesting that those of us who claim and cry out for immigration reform do not understand the law. Let me be very clear. Coming from a border state, Madam Speaker, I understand the law. Let's pass comprehensive immigration reform.
For what purposes, the gentleman from Illinois rise?
Consent to address the House for 1 minute.
Without objection, the gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I rise today to honor U.S. Army veteran John Carr, who was recognized as Illinois' January Veteran of the Month. Enlisting in 1969 during the Vietnam War, John was wounded in action and was medically retired in 1972. For his service, John received the Bronze Star, the Army Commendation Medal, and a Purple Heart, among others. John didn't know what was in store upon leaving the service, but when he saw an ad to transport other veterans to the hospital, he signed up. He then joined the Kane County Veterans Assistance Commission as a hospital caseworker and was elected as superintendent only 3 years later. He retired last February after nearly 4 decades of service to his fellow veterans. My staff is proud to have worked alongside John to help Illinois veterans navigate the federal benefit system. Constituents regularly told us how John helped anxious veterans or spouses receive their well-deserved benefits. Thank you, John, for your service to our country and to the men and women like you who have made sacrifices to defend it. I yield back.
For what purposes, the gentleman from New Jersey rise?
Yes, unanimous consent to address the House for 1 minute.
Without objection, the gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Madam Speaker, I rise today to address the issue of joblessness in America. The simple way to enhance opportunities for all Americans is continued investment in career technical education or vocational schools. Not every child's career path takes them through a 4-year college. It's necessary to provide opportunities for them to learn skills to apply for a job either right after graduation or through further certification. Career technical education teaches general employment skills and teaches skills requiring specific occupations or careers. It can provide young people with confidence to focus on career paths. Many occupations taught at vocational schools are high in demand, such as nursing, business administration, culinary arts, automotive maintenance, software programming, and engineering technology. Our labor market is evolving and placing greater emphasis on high-tech skills. To ensure vocational training keeps pace with these changes, we should encourage private industry to partner with vocational schools to identify emerging job markets and have students trained to fill these jobs. By investing in career technical education, we can ensure that more Americans have secure career opportunities after graduation.
For what purposes, the gentleman from Indiana rise?
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I seek unanimous consent to address the House for 1 minute.
Without objection, the gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. There's almost nothing Uncle Sam won't tax. You get hit at the grocery store, the gas pump, your paycheck. You even get taxed when you die. Now, as the world's eyes are on Sochi, Uncle Sam's eyes are on yet another way to collect: U.S. Olympians. Believe it or not, our men and women who bring home the gold, silver, and bronze are taxed on the value of the medals they earn and their minimal winnings, while representing our country on the world stage. That's not okay. Competing on the U.S. Olympic team is an achievement that should be celebrated, not taxed. That's why I've co-sponsored the Tax Exemptions for American Medalists Act. It prevents Olympic athletes from having to pay taxes on their winnings. Our federal government shouldn't penalize them for performing at their best. We need broad-based tax reform. In the meantime, I encourage my colleagues to support the TEAM Act and end this undue tax on our Olympians. Thank you. I yield back.
For what purpose, the gentleman from California rise?
Request unanimous consent to address the House for 1 minute.
Without objection, the gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Madam Speaker, there was a deeply troubling story this Sunday in the New York Times entitled "The End of Snow." And like all of you, I have been cheering on our Olympians in Sochi, particularly in the snow-related events. But as this article notes, climate change is threatening the very concept of Winter Olympics and snow sports in general. Current models project a 7-degree rise in global temperatures by the year 2100, leaving winters drier and our mountains bare of snow. Of the 19 cities that have hosted Winter Olympics, only 10 might still be cold enough by 2050 to host them again. Warmer winters and less snow will be disastrous to the United States' $66 billion ski industry. Now, until this weekend, California had just 12% of its average snowpack. Thankfully, it snowed in the Sierras, bringing some needed relief. But one snowstorm in California and another on the East Coast does not solve our bigger long-term climate crisis. Climate change will impact our lives in every way. Let's get to work. Let's reduce greenhouse gases and prevent the worst impacts of climate change.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Maryland rise? Gentleman, without objection, gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Madam Speaker, the train wreck of the President's health care reform just continues. This week there have been two developments. The first one, the CBO announcing their study that shows that 2.5 million full-time equivalents, that is jobs, will be eliminated from the economy by Obamacare. And yesterday, the President finally recognized that Obamacare, in fact, destroys jobs and will delay the bill's mandate to buy insurance, but only for corporations, not for hard-working American families. Madam Speaker, you don't get to keep your policy, you don't get to keep your doctor, now you don't get to keep your job. America deserves better. I yield back.
For what purpose does the gentleman from California rise?
I seek unanimous consent to address the House for 1 minute.
Without objection, gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Madam Speaker, I'd like to talk about twin prime numbers. Twin primes are two prime numbers separated by a single number, like 11 and 13 or 17 and 19. The question is, are there an infinite number of twin primes? It was the general consensus of the mathematical community until just recently that that question was beyond the capability of our current mathematical community. However, there have been some stunning advances on this problem in the last few years. In particular, last May, with the help of an online collaborative project, mathematicians pioneered new methods for addressing this problem with a huge breakthrough from Tom Zhang at the University of New Hampshire. We now know that there are an infinite number of prime number pairs separated by amounts smaller than 270. While the twin prime problem itself is still unsolved, mathematicians are hopeful that this year they can reduce the separation from 270 to less than 100. Madam Speaker, I yield back.
For what purpose does the gentlewoman from Missouri rise?
Ask unanimous consent to address the House for 1 minute.
Without objection, gentlewoman is recognized for 1 minute.
Madam Speaker, I rise today in strong support of the A-10 and close air support for our warfighters. Hundreds of brave Americans are alive today because of the performance of the A-10 in Iraq and Afghanistan. I agree with Army Chief of Staff General Raymond Odinero, who said in a SASC hearing, the A-10 is the best close air support platform we have today. Even Air Force Chief of Staff General Mark Welsh has said the A-10 is the best airplane in the world at what it does. The Air Force should not retire the A-10 before its replacement reaches full operational capability. Otherwise, it will result in a close air support gap that will put our ground troops at increased risk. There is no greater responsibility than ensuring our men and women in uniform have the support they need to accomplish their missions and return home safely. Premature divestment of the A-10 by the Air Force would create a dangerous close air support capability gap that could unnecessarily endanger American service members in future conflicts. I yield back.
For what purpose the gentleman from Rhode Island rise?
Speaker, I ask unanimous consent to address the House for 1 minute.
Without objection, gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Madam Speaker, I rise today in support of raising the minimum wage and passing H.R. 1010, the Fair Minimum Wage Act, which would give approximately 28 million Americans an overdue pay raise, promote economic growth, and strengthen the middle class. In America, if you work hard and play by the rules, you should be able to provide for your family and provide them with a decent quality of life. But for about 4.6 million Americans living in poverty, this is not the case. It's been 5 years since those working for the minimum wage have seen an increase in the minimum wage, and according to one study, the minimum wage today is worth $2 less than in 1968. This is shameful, and we have the responsibility to address growing income inequality by increasing the minimum wage immediately. Some of my colleagues on the other side of the aisle oppose this common sense legislation, arguing that it will hurt jobs. But as the New York Times noted this past weekend, this position is contrary to decades of economic research that shows increases in the minimum wage have lifted pay without hurting employment. Americans deserve a raise, and raising the minimum wage will help to protect U.S. workers, grow our economy, and build ladders of opportunity into the middle class. I thank you, Madam Speaker, and yield back.
What purpose the gentleman from Kansas rise? Without objection, the gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Madam Speaker, each day Americans use new and more common technology to communicate with each other, to read online, share photographs, shop and purchase goods, do their banking, and countless other everyday tasks. In this new tech age, Americans live their lives online. Yet the federal government acts as if these communications are not subject to Fourth Amendment protections. In fact, the IRS has claimed that Americans, quote, do not have a reasonable expectation of privacy, quote, when it comes to their emails being read by the federal government. Thousands of Americans are joining together today in an effort to bring awareness to some of the unconstitutional and intrusive surveillance practices of our United States government. February 11th is the day we fight back. It's a reminder that law-abiding Americans have certain expectations of privacy and rights guaranteed in our Constitution, that our government cannot unreasonably search and seize our personal property, including electronic property, without just cause. That is why I'm a lead sponsor of the Email Privacy Act, which will apply the same Fourth Amendment protections to our electronic communication as the paper documents in your home file cabinet. Madam Speaker, let's pass this bipartisan bill. Let's draw clear lines to ensure our government protects the constitutional rights of every American.
What purpose does the gentlewoman from Ohio rise? Gentlewoman, without objection, gentlewoman is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Madam Speaker, 2 weeks ago, President Obama stood in this chambers and addressed the nation declaring 2014 as the year of action. A year of action to put more Americans back to work and continue to make sure that middle-class families across the country are secure in their jobs and their homes. A year of action to continue fighting for equal pay for equal work in order to strengthen the American family and assure fairness in the workplace for women. A year of action to understand that when women succeed, America succeeds. Just today, I witnessed in the 100 years of the Federal Reserve to have a female, Chair Yankins, come before us. A year of action to make sure that American students can have dreams and that they can have an affordable education. We must understand that we must work together. Democrats, Madam Speaker, are doing their part. We invite our Republican colleagues to understand we need a year of action. Thank you, and I yield back.
What purpose does the gentleman from Florida rise? Without objection, the gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you. Madam Speaker, today I rise to honor National Court Reporting and Captioning Week, taking place from February 16th to February 22nd, a week that serves to recognize the value and importance that court reporters and captioners have made in American society. As a lawyer who has spent over 25 years as a litigator, I have a profound respect and appreciation for those who preserve the official record. Court reporters, broadcast captioners, and communication access real-time translation, or CART captioners, serve an integral role in my home state of Florida and throughout the United States. In fact, Florida has a particularly vibrant court reporting economy. My cousin Les Renfro has been one for over 35 years. They have over 400 small business owners in Florida, 1,300 court reporters and captioners, and 3 court reporting programs which will help fulfill the needs of an industry, and that industry that the Bureau of Labor Statistics predicts will grow 10% by 2022. That is why I'm happy to join the National Court Reporters Association in commemorating the week from February 16th to February 22nd as National Court Reporting and Captioning Week. I yield back.
For what purpose does the gentlewoman from California rise? Without objection, the gentlewoman is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Every February, we have the opportunity to celebrate Black History Month by honoring the great achievements and contributions of African-American leaders who have courageously pushed boundaries and moved our country forward in the name of justice and equality. It's an honor for me today to mention some of the great leaders from Los Angeles who have made Black history.
Tom Bradley from Los Angeles, the first African American to be mayor of Los Angeles. Great leaders like Merv Dimely, the first African American lieutenant governor of California. Congresswoman Juanita Millender McDonald, the first African American woman to chair the House Administration Committee. Asia Brown, the first African American female mayor of Compton. And my colleague, Congresswoman Karen Bass, the first black woman to be Speaker of any state legislature in U.S. history. This year is the 50th anniversary of the passage of the Civil Rights Act, but this milestone should be a reminder of the work that still needs to be done. We can't forget that for many Americans, the promise of civil rights and equality remains unfulfilled. So today and every day, let us reaffirm our commitment.
Does the gentlewoman from Florida rise?
I ask unanimous consent to address the House for 1 minute and revise next amendment.
Without objection, gentlewoman is recognized for 1 minute.
Madam Speaker, I rise today to urge the House Speaker and the Republican leadership to take up the bipartisan flood insurance bill as soon as possible. Hardworking families all across America and plenty of small businesses as well are facing exorbitant increases in their flood insurance rates. This is very harmful to their economic security and is really putting a damper on the economic recovery in communities all across the country. We need the Congress to fix this. After the reform bill was passed last session, no one imagined these exorbitant increases in flood insurance rates. The best course of action right now is to take up the bipartisan Senate-passed flood insurance bill that passed on January 30th. We can work on this together, but we need action now. I yield back.
For what purpose does the gentlewoman from Hawaii rise? Gentlewoman, without objection, gentlewoman is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. February 14th is Valentine's Day, a great commercial event. But what is it that women really want for Valentine's? It may differ for each of us, but I believe we can all agree on one thing. We want equality. Women want equal pay for equal work. Women want equal access to health care, not paying more for our health care premiums, not having pregnancy defined as a pre-existing condition, and not having decisions as to our body made for us by the denial of contraceptive services. Women want to be treated as political equals, recognized for the work we do, what we have contributed, not looked upon as second-class citizens, not deemed less somehow because our right to vote is less than 100 years old and our great country will be celebrating its 238th birthday. We want what we've earned, equality. I yield back.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Colorado hold here? Just a minute.
Rise to address for the House for 1 minute, revising some remarks.
The gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Madam Chair, today, unfortunately, we commemorate the 2 millionth deportation under President Obama. President Obama continues to tear families apart by deporting non-criminal immigrants to our country who want nothing more than to make our country stronger, grow our economy, and raise their American families. But the President can bring an end to deportations. Even if this body doesn't act, the President can stop deporting non-criminal detainees. If somebody's violated our criminal laws, they should suffer the consequences of their crimes. If their only crime was trying to make a better life for themselves in our great country, just as our own forebears did, just as my great-grandparents did, we should welcome them to help make our country stronger, create jobs for Americans, and grow our economy. Madam Chair, it's time for this body to act. Absent this body acting on comprehensive immigration reform, I encourage the President to stop deporting non-criminal aliens. I yield back the balance of my time.
For purposes, the gentleman from Ohio rise. Gentleman is recognized for 1 minute without objection.
In 1788, over 225 years ago, James Madison wrote these words: "It will be of little avail to the people that the laws are made by men of their own choice. If the laws be so voluminous that they cannot be read, or so incoherent that they cannot be understood." if they be repealed or revised before they are promulgated or undergo such incessant changes that no man who knows what the law is today can guess what it will be tomorrow. Oh, how relevant these remarks are today. Off-the-cuff changes and delays to the Affordable Care Act without proper legislative authority confuse and confound the American individuals and businesses alike. We're formed as a nation of laws, laws crafted by representatives of the people. America achieved great things by adhering to the principles of our legal framework. The fundamental genius of the American Republic came from the simple yet absolute affirmation that we as a nation operate by rule of law, law crafted by the many, not the one. Madam Speaker, I yield back.
The Chair lays before the House the following communication.
The Honorable the Speaker, House of Representatives, sir, pursuant to the permission granted in Clause 2H of Rule 2 of the Rules of the U.S. House of Representatives, the clerk received the following message from the Secretary of the Senate on February 11, 2014 at 11:05 a.m. that the Senate passed Senate 1954, Appointments, Washington's Farewell Address, signed sincerely, Karen L. Haas.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Texas rise?
Madam Speaker, by direction on the Committee on Rules, I call up House Resolution 475 and ask for its immediate consideration.
The clerk will report the resolution.
House Calendar Number 84, House Resolution 475, resolved that at any time after the adoption of this resolution, the Speaker may, pursuant to Clause 2B of Rule 18, declare the House resolved into the Committee of the Whole House on the State of the Union for consideration of the bill H.R. 3193 to amend the Consumer Financial Protection Act of 2010 to strengthen the review authority of the Financial Stability Oversight Council of regulations issued by the Bureau of Consumer Financial Protection and for other purposes. The first reading of the bill shall be dispensed with. All points of order against consideration of the bill are waived. General debate shall be confined to the bill and amendments specified in this section and shall not exceed 1 hour, equally divided and controlled by the Chair and Ranking Minority Member of the Committee on Financial Services. After general debate, the bill shall be considered for amendment under the 5-minute rule. It shall be in order to consider as an original bill for the purpose of amendment under the 5-minute rule, an amendment in the nature of a substitute consisting of the text of Rules Committee Print 113-36, modified by the amendment printed in Part A of the report of the Committee on Rules accompanying this resolution. That amendment in the nature of a substitute shall be considered as read. All points of order against that amendment in the nature of a substitute are waived. No amendment to that amendment in the nature of a substitute shall be in order except those printed in Part B of the report of the Committee on Rules accompanying this resolution. Each such amendment may be offered only in the order printed in the report, may be offered only by a member designated in the report, shall be considered as read, shall be debatable for the time specified in the report, equally divided and controlled by the proponent and an opponent, shall not be subject to amendment, and shall not be subject to a demand for division of the question in the House or in the Committee of the Whole. All points of order against such amendments are waived. At the conclusion of consideration of the bill for amendment, the committee shall rise and report the bill to the House with such amendments as may have been adopted. Any member may demand a separate vote in the House on any amendment adopted in the Committee of the Whole to the bill or to the amendment in the nature of a substitute made in order as original text. The previous question shall be considered as ordered on the bill and amendments thereto to final passage without intervening motion, except one motion to recommit with or without instructions. Section 2. On any legislative day during the period from February 13, 2014 through February 24, 2014, A, the journal of the proceedings of the previous day shall be considered as approved, and B, the Chair may at any time declare the House adjourned to meet at a date and time within the limits of Clause 4, Section 5, Article 1 of the Constitution, to be announced by the Chair in declaring the adjournment. Section 3. The Speaker may appoint members to perform the duties of the Chair for the duration of the period addressed by Section 2 of this resolution, as though under Clause 8A of Rule 1. Section 4. the requirement of Clause 6A of Rule 13 for a two-thirds vote to consider a report from the Committee on Rules on the same day it is presented to the House is waived with respect to any resolution reported through the legislative day of February 12, 2014, providing for consideration or disposition of a measure relating to the public debt limit.
The gentleman from Texas is recognized for 1 hour.
Madam Speaker, thank you very much. For the purpose of the debate only, I yield the customary 30 minutes to the gentleman from Boulder, Colorado, my colleague and my friend, Mr. Polis, pending which I yield myself such times I may consume. During consideration of this resolution, all times yield for the purpose of debate only. Madam Speaker, I ask unanimous consent that all members have 5 legislative days to revise and extend their remarks. House Resolution 475 provides for a structured rule for consideration of H.R. 3193. This rule makes an order every amendment that complies with House rules, giving House members of the majority and the minority ample opportunity to participate in today's debate. The legislation before us today takes important steps to restore transparency, accountability, and effective oversight in our federal regulatory process. Established in 2010 under the Dodd-Frank Wall Street Reform and Consumer Protection Act, the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, known as CFPB, is granted the authority to regulate the financial services industry in an effort to limit bad actors and protect consumers from fraud and abuse. Unfortunately, by design, no mistake, the CFPB has virtually zero congressional oversight, limited judicial review, and unilateral ability to promulgate any rule or regulation it deems appropriate. In essence, it is wholly unaccountable to the American people and to the United States Congress, the men and women who, by the Constitution of the United States, have the authority and the responsibility to represent the American people through elected office. This is not how our government is meant to operate, but this is what former Speaker Nancy Pelosi and House Democrats desperately wanted: control of the financial services industry by one person who answers solely to the President of the United States. I have heard from numerous community bankers in Texas. Madam Speaker, I'm from Dallas, Texas, and proud to say that Dallas, Texas is home to community bankers who understand that they are on the front lines of a new regulatory regime. And not just community bankers, all bankers and those covered under financial services regulations. Accounts of the impact stemming from the new CFPB rules are startling. Specifically, they have told me that the CFPB's new regulations regarding qualified mortgages will significantly increase borrowing costs and considerably reduce the number of available mortgages. Sounds familiar, doesn't it? Sounds like something that the Democrats concocted to make sure that health care was in trouble so they could show up with the answer of the Affordable Care Act, which is nothing that's significant to, in its name, implied in its name. They are doing exactly to financial services what the Democrats did to health care in this country, and bankers and financial services industry understands this. In a time when Americans are looking to the federal government simply to promote and increase public sector investment in our economy and to allow the free enterprise system to flourish up to and including offering more jobs, stable opportunity for meaningful capital, instead we see Washington bureaucrats literally at the head, one person at the head of the organization who can make all these decisions, handing down new rules and regulations which I believe do the exact opposite of making it easier, safer, and better to grow jobs and to have Americans be a competitive marketplace. The bill before us today is not about deregulation. It is about appropriate, balanced regulation with ideas that come from not just the Committee of Financial Services, led by our great young Chairman Jeb Hensarling, but perhaps more importantly, ideas that coincide with other large government agencies, where it is a bipartisan effort, not by a titular head of one organization. While the American people do need protection from bad actors in the financial services industry, they also need protection, I believe, from an activist government that unilaterally dispenses burdensome and needless regulations which negatively impact not only our economy, but the industry that helps provide needed capital, jobs, and enrichment of the American financial services industry, which is a part of the free enterprise system. Madam Speaker, I'm sure you're familiar with Obamacare's Independent Payment Advisory Board, known as IPAB. Yes, it is the one body of unelected bureaucrats which rations health care and makes decisions, once again, without judicial or congressional oversight on America's seniors. And just as IPAB restricts choices in the health care sector, so too do unelected bureaucrats at the CFPB. They restrict choices in the financial sector. They are trying to choke off the free enterprise system as a result of rules and regulations that become burdensome, and so people quit offering their services. By regulating the types of credit cards, mortgages, or loans that Americans can get, the CFPB makes unilateral decisions regarding what types of financial tools Americans can use. The American people, I believe, deserve this as something better from Washington, as opposed to this which they're getting, which is a one-size-fits-all approach from Washington, D.C. That's why I support H.R. 3193. It brings much-needed balance to the CFPB by replacing the lone director with a 5-member commission to be appointed by the President and confirmed by the Senate, similar to other financial regulators, so that no one person can unilaterally determine regulations which impact millions of Americans and has little oversight by our courts or by Congress. Additionally, as an independent agency housed in the Federal Reserve today, the CFPB is not subject to appropriation. They are a mandatory spending item as a result of what President Obama and House and Senate Democrats have done. By restoring this important check and balance, Congress needs to make sure that we appropriate the money that they should use. And it will ensure that the CFPB acts as intended and does not continue to impose economic devastating regulations on the American economy. To have no oversight and no authority for the money that they spend, I believe, is a misuse of the way we would want a government agency to work. Whether you're a Republican or a Democrat, we should be for understanding they should serve at the pleasure of the American people, not the reverse therein. Finally, this legislation takes important steps to protect Americans' personal, non-public information. Yesterday, up in the Rules Committee, we heard testimony from Chairman Jeb Hensarling of Dallas, Texas, that the CFPB currently maintains over 900 million credit card records. That's right, the NSA of financial services. That's exactly what the CFPB is. And such an immense amount of private data held by the federal government presents ample opportunity for misuse. Madam Speaker, I do not believe that they should have this information, and I believe they should immediately recuse themselves of gaining this information. H.R. 3193 will ensure that Americans are protected by requiring expressed written consent from the CFPB before they can obtain, access, collect, use, or disclose any personal, non-public information. I think it is dangerous to have a government agency with this type of power, information, and as we have seen from the IRS, a misuse of personal information and data that has become an abuse of power. This bill will require that the CFPB assert in writing how that information will be used and to request it. Madam Speaker, the American people are tired of the Obama administration's blatant disregard for the laws which govern our great nation. Just yesterday, we witnessed once again President Obama's willingness to do whatever he wants when he unilaterally delayed the employer mandate of the health care bill by 1 year. Instead of giving all Americans relief from the Affordable Care Act, known as Obamacare, the administration is single-handedly picking winners and losers, by the way, on behalf of business as opposed to individuals. And just as the President has done with health care, there is nothing to prevent the CFPB from following suit and unilaterally deciding who will be subject to crushing regulation and who will not. That is why H.R. 3193 is so important. Madam Speaker, we're on the floor today because we're talking about what literally is a big government action that was done several years ago by the President of the United States, by the former Speaker of the House, Nancy Pelosi, and by Senate Majority Leader Harry Reid. Republicans understand that big government not only is costly and expensive, but that some people want them to control our lives. Freedom, in fact, Madam Speaker, is worth fighting for, and so Republicans are here today on the floor to balance that tilt in favor of freedom, opportunity, and for the right of their own person, an individual in this nation, to know if your government is collecting your financial records, and you have a right to know that. And that is another reason why Republicans are pleased to say today we are talking about very, very important issues to every single American. It's more than freedom. It is a rule of law. I urge my colleagues to vote yes on the rule and yes on the underlying legislation. I reserve the balance of my time.
Gentleman reserves the balance of his time. Gentleman from Colorado.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I thank the gentleman from Texas for yielding me the customary 30 minutes. I yield myself such time as I may consume.
Without objection.
Madam Speaker, I rise in opposition to the rule and the underlying bill, H.R. 3193. This package of bills was brought under a restrictive process that prevented efforts from members on both sides of the aisle from improving the legislation. H.R. 3193 would gut the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. Now, a lot has been said by the gentleman from Texas that I believe has mischaracterized what the Consumer Financial Bureau actually does. It in no way restricts our freedoms, Madam Speaker. In fact, banks aren't the only entities that have freedom. American consumers have freedom too. American consumers want to be protected from predatory practices, Madam Speaker. How many of us have signed a credit card agreement or with the font size that's too small to even read? We want to make sure that people aren't giving away their home and their livelihood when they enter into a credit card agreement, a simple loan, or other financial transactions. The American people want that certainty. When we're talking about making sure that markets operate well, that competition exists in the consumer financial marketplace, that people have different financial options that empower themselves, there needs to be a referee on the field. This bill effectively blindfolds and handcuffs that referee, takes her off the field, and lets the banks have their day with the American people. That's why I oppose this bill. This bill will not advance a constructive economic agenda. This bill will not address our broken immigration system. It won't secure our borders that hundreds of people enter our country illegally every day. It won't reunite shattered families. Earlier today, I spoke of how under President Obama's administration, over 2 million people have now been deported from this country. This bill will not end that. Instead of moving forward, it blindfolds the referee and ensures that predatory financial institutions can take advantage of the American people without a watchdog. This bill has serious flaws. It would add additional bureaucracy to the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, replacing a director with a commission. The gentleman from Texas said somehow this bill meant that there wasn't big government. This bill establishes more big government, more commissions, rather than having, guess how most private companies are run, Madam Speaker? There's usually a CEO in charge. They don't have some directorate or commission. I mean, that sounds more like the Soviet Union than the United States of America, what the Republicans are proposing in this bill. This bill would also prevent the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau from offering salaries or benefits to employees that are competitive with other financial regulators. Guess what, Madam Speaker? The financial industry pays well. The big banks pay well. That's wonderful. That's the beauty of the capitalist system. If they're creating value, working for a big bank, and they're earning hundreds of thousands of dollars a year in our market economy, that's wonderful. Well, guess what? If you want somebody who understands that business to be able to work on behalf of the American people as a watchdog, you need to pay a competitive salary to make sure that they're able to then use their expertise that they've developed in the private sector to protect their fellow Americans from predatory or scrupulous activities. This bill would impede the ability to attract and retain qualified and experienced people that have to handle very complex regulatory issues. It would also eliminate the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau's independence and parity with other regulators by subjecting it to the appropriations process. Sadly, last night during the Rules debate, one of my colleagues on the Rules Committee equated the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau to the Gestapo. That's insulting to our civil servants who work for the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, consumers that it serves, and extremely offensive to the true victims of Nazi Germany. It's inappropriate to even compare the intentions of the U.S. government, whether it's led by Democrats or Republicans, to those of Adolf Hitler and Nazi Germany. The Consumer Financial Protection Bureau has played a crucial role in helping millions of Americans become more informed and empower them to make financial choices that benefit them and their families. For instance, at a time that we know that higher education and college are more important than ever, the cost of higher education continues to skyrocket. The Consumer Financial Protection Bureau has developed a website that helps students understand their borrowing options before they take on substantial debt, make sure they're aware of the lowest interest rates that they can use to finance their education. The user-friendly tools allow families to compare financial aid and college costs, choose a loan with a low interest rate, select the repayment terms that are most favorable to them. As the largest student loan lender, the federal government should help make sure that students have the information they need to help take control of their financial destinies. I was honored to work with the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau on my Know Before You Owe Act, which would provide students and families with information about their eligibility for federal loans before they take out more costly, higher interest rate private loans. While I hope that Congress would pass this bill, the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau also hopes to advance this important cause even without legislation. This bill on the floor today would hamper their ability to prevent students from paying more than they need to for their college education. Now, Democrats are open to improving the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau through bipartisan proposals. Unfortunately, the House majority has shunned bipartisanship in favor of these bills. We can do better, Madam Speaker. The American people want to make sure there's a referee, that there's a watchdog. We want to make sure that our banking industry and financial services industry can continue to grow and flourish in this country. And one of the most important factors in the success of that industry is the confidence that the American people have in the financial services industry to be fair and honest. The establishment of the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau helps ensure that the American people are confident in the financial products that are being marketed by banks across the country and will lead to continued job growth in the financial services industry, which America is a leader in, both here and abroad. Let's talk for a moment about what we're not discussing under this rule, Madam Speaker. We're not taking one step, 1 inch, towards fixing our broken immigration system, a huge drag on our economic growth. Many residents of our country that are living here illegally in the shadows of the underground economy simply want to work. They want to pay taxes. They want to raise their American kids here. They want to raise a family. They want to participate in the same American dream that welcomed my great-grandparents when they came to this country. The House Republicans' principles on immigration reform were an important step forward. I applaud them. They were promising. There was nothing in those principles that was mutually inconsistent with the Democratic desire to secure our borders, create a law enforcement environment where we know who's here, and make sure that we can have a compassionate approach to uniting families. Nearly a year ago, the new Democrat Coalition Immigration Task Force released detailed principles as well on comprehensive immigration reform. I'm proud to say that last October, Democrats and Republicans joined together to introduce a bipartisan bill, H.R. 15, on comprehensive immigration reform. The bill creates jobs, reduces our deficit, secures our borders, and reflects our values as Americans. Yet to date, the only immigration vote in this Congress that the House has had was a vote to defund the Deferred Action or DACA program, which allows dreamers to finally get to work and pay taxes to make our country stronger, and instead subjected dreamers to deportation at taxpayer expense. We can and we must do better, Madam Speaker, and this rule and this bill simply doesn't do it. I reserve the balance of my time.
Gentleman reserves the balance of his time. Gentleman from Texas.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, at this time I'd like to yield 7 minutes to the gentleman from Weston, Wisconsin, a member of the Financial Services and Budget Committee. He is not just the author of the bill, he is an awesome and outstanding new member of Congress, the gentleman from Wisconsin, Mr. Duffy.
Gentleman from Wisconsin is recognized for 7 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair, or Madam Speaker, and Mr. Chairman, thank you for yielding. Just to be clear, the bill that is before the House today is not a repeal bill of the CFPB. It is a modification, a reform package to the CFPB, so that my colleagues and friends across the aisle talk about how there will be no consumer protection. That's absolutely false. We just want to make sure the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau works better and is more responsive to the American people. So I want to talk about a few of the things that this bill does. The first thing, it moves the director of the CFPB over to a bipartisan commission of 5. Now, I know my friends across the aisle have taken issue with this. However, when under Dodd-Frank, the CFPB was originally envisioned by House Democrats and the former chairman, Barney Frank, they didn't have a single director. They actually had a commission. When Elizabeth Warren, now Senator Warren, envisioned this package, it wasn't a director. It was a commission. So now that my friends across the aisle take issue with a reform package that has a commission and not a director, it was their original idea. So let's not play partisan politics. Let's join together on points of agreement, and this is one of them. Another concern, the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau is not responsive to Congress because it doesn't get its funding from Congress. It doesn't go through the appropriations process, which gives us great oversight here in the House. Their funding comes from the Federal Reserve. We think it's appropriate when you have an agency that is so powerful and so unaccountable that we give the elected members of the American people power to say how much money they should have and how they should use it. We don't have that ability right now. And who on God's green earth says that we should take power away from Congress and let them set their own budgets? Going to the point of unaccountability, the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, they set their own pay. Where in the free market system does any employee tell the employer, this is what you're going to pay me? I'm setting my own pay. And that's what they do at the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. And all we say is, we, the Congress, the elected representatives of the American people, we should set the pay of the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. Common sense reforms that actually work for the American people, and frankly, it'll work for the CFPB, making them far more accountable. The way this bill is set up, not bill, the law, the way the law is set up, big banks on Wall Street, the very big banks that caused the financial crisis, they're able to actually go have consumer financial protection rules reviewed by FOXX. And if FOXX thinks that the rule, as petitioned by big banks, can create systemic risk, the rule can be overturned. So big banks at Wall Street, they get a voice. They get to go, well, this is bad for us. Overturn the rule. But if you come from rural Wisconsin, where we only have small community banks and credit unions, and you see one of our small financial institutions going to FOXX and saying, hey, this rule is bad for us, the small banks or credit unions, please overturn the CFPB rule, they're going to laugh them out of FOXX. They don't have a voice. Small financial institutions, credit unions, and small banks don't have a choice to go to FOXX and have a rule overturned by the CFPB. But the way you wrote the, Mr. Speaker, the way the law was written and the way it's been implemented is that they've given a big, loud voice to Wall Street banks, but have shut out the small community banks and credit unions that are all over America, the very banks and institutions that lend money to our families, the very institutions that are our small businesses on Main Street America, they go to and say, will you give me a loan so I can expand my business? Maybe create an extra job or two in America. Those are the ones that have been shut out in the review process from the CFPB. That doesn't work for consumers. That doesn't hurt consumers. That actually helps consumers. And that helps small-town America. But I think one of the most important portions of this reform bill, and again, it's a reform bill, it's not a repeal bill, is what we do in regard to data. America has recently learned that the NSA is collecting phone data and information on them and keeping it. Now, Americans have said, listen, I'm okay with AT&T or Verizon, whoever my phone company is, that they have my records. But the American people have never given the American government permission to take their phone records. And when they heard about it, they were outraged. They were outraged. And I know that my friends across the aisle are supportive of this expansive NSA. They're supportive of a big government taking information on Americans. But most Americans say no. We don't want that kind of relationship between the American citizenry and our government. And just like the NSA, the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau is collecting financial data on the American citizenry. They're collecting information on almost 1 billion credit cards. I'll say it again. The Consumer Financial Protection Bureau is collecting data and information on almost 1 billion credit cards. And I would ask, do you think they've asked permission of the American people to take their financial data? Absolutely not. All we ask for in this reform bill is, if you want to take America's financial information and you say that you're here to protect the American citizenry, well, why don't you ask them? Ask if you can take it. Because I guarantee I know what they're going to say. They're going to say, no way. I'm okay with my bank having this information, my credit union having this information, but I'll be darned if I want some agency that says they're here to protect me collecting my financial information and my financial records.
The gentleman's time has expired. The gentleman's time has expired.
Mr. Speaker, I'd like to give the gentleman 4 additional minutes.
The gentleman may continue.
Collecting information.